Tonight, another high seas confrontation between Israel and an aid flotilla. Crew members say the Israeli Navy has boarded their boats as they sail towards Gaza. We hear from them as it happened. Afghanistan offline. We're inside the country that was all but disconnected from the world.
Suddenly, I've got signal back on my phone here in Kabul, and driving around the city, it seems other people have too. Lots of them looking excitedly as their phones started to ping.
Sky News is told it's another weapon for the Taliban to use against those with no other lifelines. So is this the new frontier in a Taliban immorality crackdown? I'll be speaking to the award-winning Afghan journalist Zahra Joya. Also ahead, political football. A FIFA boss tells Sky News UEFA should decide whether Israeli teams are banned.
It's an issue that changes from a geopolitics standpoint almost on a daily basis, as we saw with the last proposal of a peace plan. There's a lot of moving parts.
France's Navy says it's boarded a Russian oil tanker suspected of being part of a so-called ghost fleet. And Jane Goodall, the environmentalist renowned for her globe-spanning work to protect chimpanzees, dies aged 91. All of that and more coming up in The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to the programme. We begin with breaking news. An aid flotilla sailing towards Gaza has been intercepted by the Israeli Navy in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Israel's foreign ministry says the global Sumud flotilla has been asked to change course away from an active combat zone. Crew on board described being illegally boarded by military personnel. Well, not long ago, I spoke to David Alder, a flotilla crew member, on the phone.
We obviously have traversed the great Mediterranean Sea as the largest humanitarian convoy in history to do so, carrying humanitarian aid. We are well within international waters, but right now we're being encircled by Israeli naval boats. Right now I'm looking at one that's rapidly approaching our boats, flashing lights and menacing the possibility of an interception. We know that 3 boats or 4 boats are confirmed to have intercepted, but it's a long operational procedure because our convoy is so large, and so we don't know in this kind of fog exactly the details of where the boats are going or where we're being taken or what the procedure is. Obviously, it's important to emphasize the illegality of the procedure, but here we are.
Yes, as you say, you're in international waters at the moment. Israel is saying, and the Foreign Ministry of Israel has asked your flotilla to change course because they're saying they need you to move away from an active combat zone. Just your response to that.
I have 2 responses. The first is that to correct the record on this, the Israeli response has been to ask us to hand over humanitarian aid to Israeli authorities that can then be distributed in good faith to the people of Gaza. We think this is a preposterous, absurd proposal when we've seen over the course of 2 years their determination to block checkpoints at land such as Rafah for the critical distribution of aid to the people of Gaza. Of course, we were never going to do that. Second, our mission is 100% legal and protected by international humanitarian law and the law of the seas that would allow civilian vessels such as ours, carrying nothing but baby formula and food and medicine, to cross international waters, to reach Palestinian waters, and to reach the people of Gaza. This is an absurd flagrant violation that should be enervating the entire international community in terms of its disregard for any standard of international law that should otherwise not put us in life vests sitting on top of our boats, cowering in some degree of fear that the Israeli Navy may commit a crime similar to what they did in 2010 when 9 humanitarian workers were killed on another flotilla that was similarly carrying humanitarian aid to reach the people of Gaza.
David, the images we're seeing right now across our screens are of all of you in your different boats. Can you just tell us what exactly is happening in this moment? Have you been brought to a standstill? Have you been told to wait? What exactly are you doing?
The communication from the Israeli authorities has been to instruct us and demand us to stop before we enter what they have declared to be a war zone. We think this is a completely fictitious, imaginary line in the water that Israel has somehow drawn and claimed as its own. So we continue to sail towards Gaza up until the point at which we are intercepted. What I'm seeing in the sea around me is a massive fleet of patrol vehicles, flashing floodlights and deboarding boats one by one from the 42 humanitarian vessels that have traveled together with us. So we're not sure if or when our boat will be boarded. I think we have a degree of confidence that they will come and find us and deliver on the plan that they've set up before, which is to transfer us to a floating prison, as they've called it, a large frigate, and then process us in prison on land.
That was David Adler, a flotilla crew member, speaking to me on the phone a little earlier. Let's go straight to our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons, who joins us live from Jerusalem. Adam, we've seen this kind of confrontation between flotilla crew members and the Israeli authorities in the past. This is a much bigger convoy, so intercepting them, boarding each one is going to take much longer. But the outcome of this was pretty much predictable.
It was completely predictable. Yes, you're right. This flotilla is over 40 boats. But I think from a long way out, probably from when they left Barcelona, we could have predicted that it would end like this, that they would have said, we are going to go to Gaza. The Israelis would say, absolutely, you are not. They would keep throwing mud at each other, which is what has happened. The Israeli authorities have called this the Hamas flotilla, have allegedly come up with documents that link some people on this flotilla with Hamas. Those on the flotilla have said that Israel is committing genocide and have said that they're on a humanitarian mission. I think everybody knew that these boats were not going to land in Gaza, so this sort of confrontation was inevitable. What has happened this time is that the global exposure that they have received has meant that everyone was going to be watching and waiting for this moment, and Israel knows that as well as anybody, that what it does here will be scrutinised. And I think it's understood that, bear in mind there were three nations, Italy, Spain and Turkey, who sent naval boats at some stage to watch over this flotilla, that the Israelis knew that they couldn't just come flying in with violent means. They'd have to tread a little carefully. Antonio Tajani, the Italian foreign minister, said that he had assurances from Gideon Saar, who's his counterpart in Israel, that Israel would not use violent means. Italians have said that they are expecting Italian nationals on this flotilla to be taken to Ashdod and then expelled from Israel. That is inevitably what is going to happen. These people will be arrested, they'll be detained, and then they'll effectively be deported. And both sides will claim victory, to be honest, Yalda. Those on the flotilla will say that they have highlighted genocide, famine, and the illegality of this war. And the Israelis will say, well, that was a complete waste of time. It was nothing more than a publicity stunt. And if you really cared about humanitarian aid, you would have given us the relatively small amount of aid that you are carrying in, and we have distributed, or we would have given it to a third party who could have distributed it in Gaza. All of that is predictable. What we don't know is the logistics of how the Israeli military can stop 40 boats from getting to Gaza. It would seem that they are sending a pretty chunky number of their own vessels. Of course, they're bigger, more highly trained. And they are intercepting these boats gradually. There are reports they're using water cannon. So they're not going too gently on this front. But what they will do is, without doubt, do everything they can to stop these boats. We were almost sure that it was going to happen under cover of darkness. And not that long after darkness fell here in Jerusalem, across Israel, we had those reports from the flotilla and saying that somewhere between 12 and 20 boats they had seen on their radar, and I think that is what has come to pass. The Israelis told them, move to Ashdod, divert your course. Of course, the flotilla didn't do that, and so we are in the position now of this series of confrontations between the boats and the military.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, a large convoy and intercepting them and also getting them to get off board is going to be a monumental task. Adam, thank you so much for bringing us up to date. Now let's go to Afghanistan. For many of us, an internet outage is a frustrating inconvenience. Never big enough, though, to knock an entire nation offline. That was the chaotic reality in Afghanistan for the past 2 days. No internet, no mobile phone service. Data from the monitoring organisation NetBlocks shows how it all fell off a cliff without warning on Monday. It was only today that connectivity was restored, just as suddenly. So what actually happened? Well, 2 days ago, the Taliban ordered a nationwide shutdown of the internet across the country in an attempt to curb so-called immorality. It was basically the Taliban experimenting with censorship measures. On this programme, we've often spoken about the plight of Afghan women and girls and how their future and that of much of the Afghan people seems bleak. But this was the Taliban literally plunging them into darkness. Just take a moment to think about what it's like for Afghan women and girls already pushed out of the public eye. The internet was their lifeline, their only connection with each other and the outside world to seek help, advice, support and information. Well, after 48 hours of flights grounded, hospitals unable to operate and life in general coming to a halt, the internet is back online now. But how long before they attempt to do this again? Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch reports from Kabul.
There was little sign of life at Kabul International Airport. The runway, eerily quiet. Outside, relatives waiting for family members that never came. This, the chaos and confusion created by a 48-hour internet shutdown that came without warning.
All our flight schedules depend on the internet. We have passengers, both local and international, who all depend on the internet, as their flight bookings, seat confirmation and cancellation all depend on the internet. It's the only way they contact us.
Telecommunications were also cut across Afghanistan, with no one able to use their phones. The capital, a city moving, but beneath the surface, struggling to function. Fast connectivity is trumpeted on billboards everywhere. But on the ground, people were plunged into sudden darkness, unable to transfer money, and Afghans abroad unable to send any back to loved ones. Girls over 12 banned from school who've been learning online were also cut off. The Taliban gave no official explanation for the blackout, but in recent weeks they've imposed internet restrictions in certain provinces, aimed, they say, at preventing immorality. We asked the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology for a statement, but they didn't provide one. With rumours swirling on the streets, frustration set in.
My demand is that mobile service should be restored immediately, as our business and daily life depends on it. Restoration of mobile service and internet will help our business run smoothly. Our business is stuck at the moment.
We cannot contact our families and friends abroad. We demand the government solve these problems.
But by late afternoon, they got their wish. Well, it's the third day of this shutdown, and suddenly I've got signal back on my phone, and we've been driving around Kabul, and it looks like others have theirs too. Lots of people excitedly looking at their phones because there were no guarantees. People had no idea if and when things might be restored. There was no official statement from the Taliban either. It's created a lot of uncertainty. Many in the country completely caught off guard. In a country where individual freedoms have been increasingly peeled back, activists warned of the harm to ordinary Afghans.
For a poor country like Afghanistan right now, the amount of money that the banks lost, the amount of money that the airlines lost, the amount of money that, everybody lost is like, oof, it's really horrible. This has become like the weapons against the people of Afghanistan. It can be used anytime, at anywhere, in any way. And that's not right.
We still don't know exactly why or how the shutdown happened. But after the Taliban's dramatic takeover more than 4 years ago, it's shown once again
just how quickly the course of this country can shift. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Kabul, Afghanistan.
Well, I'm joined now by Zara Joya, an award-winning Afghan journalist and the editor-in-chief and founder of Rukhsana Media, which she runs from exile in the UK. Zara John, good to speak to you. I mean, frankly, what I'm hearing from those I'm speaking to in the country and those close to, the supreme leader in Kandahar, that he made a unilateral decision without fully comprehending and understanding the consequences. He based this on trying to shut down things like pornography, for example, but didn't quite understand that this would have flights grounded, that hospitals wouldn't be able to function, that people wouldn't be able to trade in the markets, for example, as a result.
Well, thanks, Yalda John, for raising this this issue. It's very important for us, for all Afghans. It was one of the devastating restrictions that we have seen from the Taliban, unfortunately. And yes, it was very crucial decision that happened to people of Afghanistan during these past 2 days. And it has a huge consequence on the daily life of Afghan citizens. And there is completely the system that was working 2 days ago, it was stopped. We have seen that the flights have been banned, the hospitals were closed, and completely the way that we had this connection, Afghanistan to the world, was completely blocked. And it was one of the most painful and frustrating things that we have experienced over the past 2 days. And what I have received reaction from people Afghanistan after a few hours ago when they restored the internet, and they said it was a nightmare. It was kind of, the people told it is the end of the world, because today everything is depend on the internet, and it's the digital world. And it's really, really hard moment for Afghan people.
Yeah, I mean, in general, Afghans over the course of the last 20 years have been connected digitally. Many of them have multiple mobile phones, for example. That's how they stay in contact with each other and family in other parts of the world. But Zara John, over the course of the last 4 years, since August 2021, the Taliban have issued over 118 decrees and directives. We know they've impacted girls' schools, women going to university, women working. We've seen all of these things. This was essentially plunging the whole country into absolute darkness, literally.
Well, absolutely, you're right. It was a completely darkness, and it was a completely blocked out. It was something that we feel that how it is dramatically and systematically we disconnect from our beloved country, and how we disconnect with our people inside the country. And it is the same for our people inside Afghanistan and the young generation, that they really relied on the internet, because online education is the only option remain for the young generation of Afghanistan, for the girls, for the women, that they are seeking for education, they are seeking for jobs. And so many of Afghan women, they are earning, they have some kind of income to live with that inside the country, because they lost their jobs. And also, unfortunately, after this this banning of internet, there was a lot of rumors, and then there was a huge fear surrounded Afghans, because we have heard that somebody says, oh, tonight America is, going back to background airspace,
The Bagram Air Base, there was concerns that perhaps
yes,
that would normalize relations.
And also there was some other issues that we have heard, and none of them was true, but there was lots of misinformation and disinformation coming out because of this blacked out of the internet.
Zahra John, are you worried, and the Afghans you're speaking to in the country, are they worried that this is the Taliban experimenting with what they can and cannot do, and if they have the ability to restrict the internet, for example, or shut it down, that this would happen again?
Well, absolutely. There is an uncertain situation for Afghans. And then, for instance, my colleagues today, they sent me the reports that they wrote it, and they said, we have no idea whether we will access to internet tomorrow or not, because it is, this decision made by the Taliban supreme leaders, and there is no guarantee for us that what it will be happened next. We really don't know, but this is one of the big questions, that what will be the next, because there is no sustainability, unfortunately. There is no guarantee for nothing, and Afghans, they have nothing now, so their hands are empty. They have literally, they have nothing.
Zahra John, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme and bringing us up to date on the current situation in Afghanistan. Now, let's just bring you up to date on our top story this evening. The flotilla, roughly a 42-vessel convoy, and you can see the images of that flotilla on our screens right now. Some of the vessels that have been intercepted in international waters. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has said that they are in an active combat zone. Those on board say they are in international waters, and what they're doing is absolutely legal. But we've got an update now from the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They say that, and this is a quote from an ex-post that they've put up, they've said, already several vessels of the Hamas Sumud flotilla have been safely stopped, and their passengers are being transferred to an Israeli port. Greta and her friends are safe and healthy. And you remember Greta Thunberg was detained and then deported a few months ago. There are roughly about 500 people from around the world, part of this flotilla, about 42 vessels full of aid, things like baby formula, based on what they were telling me. I was speaking earlier to David Adler, a flotilla crew member, on the phone, and they were saying they were basically waiting now and expecting the Israeli authorities, the military, to board the vessels and detain or take them off the vessels. Of course, there are some 42 of these vessels in that convoy, the largest that they've ever had, with roughly about 500 people on board, as I said, from around the world, trying to make their way towards Gaza. Partly symbolic, because this situation was totally predicted based on the previous flotillas that we've seen, whether it was in 2010 or in different times in the past couple of years. They've been intercepted and deported. There was a violent escalation in 2010 where almost 10 people were killed, but there were assurances given by the Israeli Foreign Ministry to the Italian Foreign Minister that there would be no violence used to prevent them, but they would eventually be intercepted, which is exactly what's happened. Now, those on board the flotilla probably knew this would be the outcome, and yet they wanted to do it because they say they wanted to highlight the plight of the Palestinian people. The Israeli Foreign Ministry says that this was just performative and that they should have given the aid they wanted to deliver into Gaza to the right authorities. But of course, we know from the past almost year, the last 9 months, 8 months or so, that no aid, sufficient aid, has not been getting into Gaza. There was a blockade earlier in the year, and now just over 100 trucks are managing to get into Gaza. many are concerned about the number of trucks. Famine has been declared in parts of Gaza City. So this particular flotilla, attempting to highlight the issue in Gaza, the Israeli Foreign Ministry accusing them of being Hamas-backed and say that they are now being transferred to an Israeli port. And they've made a dig there at Greta Thunberg and said her and her friends are safe and healthy. So that's a bit of an update there on the situation with that flotilla. Now, staying on similar issues here, a growing effort to restrict, even cancel, Israel's participation on the sporting and cultural world stage. As we reported last night, Europe's football governing body UEFA is weighing up whether or not to ban Israel from taking part in matches. We spoke to human rights activist Ashish Prasha, who is the founder and director of the campaign group Game Over Israel. Just have a listen.
When you think about normalization of atrocities, war crimes, genocide, apartheid in history, when you normalize it through culture. There is no more important place to end a relationship with someone committing these war crimes or atrocities than in culture. And football is the biggest sporting, cultural event in the world. It's the only sport that everyone plays.
And there's a swelling rebellion within Eurovision, with countries vowing not to take part next year if Israel participates. More on that shortly from our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer. First, our sports correspondent Rob Harris spoke to Victor Montegliani, a FIFA vice president, about efforts to ban Israel from the pitch.
The State Department told us at Sky News last week that they would intervene if FIFA was going to ban Israel from international football. Are you getting a lot of pressure to move towards a ban?
No, there's no. I mean, I'm sure people have opinions, but you know, the reality is that issue is the jurisdiction of UEFA first and foremost. It's their member, and they have a process. I think they've been public about their process and their timelines around it. So we need to respect that, and so you know, I think it's important that we respect that it's UEFA's decision. Obviously, you know, UEFA and FIFA will be having whatever discussions they need to, no different than any other confederation would on any other member. You know, obviously, it's an issue that changes from a geopolitics standpoint almost on a daily basis, as we saw with the last proposal of a peace plan. You know, there's a lot of moving parts with respect to that issue.
Is it right to be giving peace a chance rather than looking at any sporting sanctions now?
You know, I think what's important is, and again, you know, it's a question for UEFA as their member, but in terms of a process, we have to remember that, you know, whether it's Israel or whether it's the FA or anybody else, you know, this is a member organization, and the primary focus for us as leaders of a confederation is that your dialogue is with your member, ensuring that, you know, that football is able to be played, that football is in a good spot. And those are, I think, all the parameters that go into a decision-making process. You know, having said that, I think, you know, those are all things that will be taken into consideration, I believe, once we get to that point.
Do you have a personal view?
No, actually, I don't, actually, in a sense that I think it's important when you're a leader that you respect other people's jurisdictions. And even if you do have an opinion, that you keep it to yourself. And the reason I say that is because, you know, I have had similar situations in my own region with countries that were maybe not as headline as the one we're dealing with, but it's the same issues. And, you know, it's my issue to deal with in CONCACAF, and maybe other people that are in my position and other confederations might have an opinion. But to be honest with you, unless I ask them for it, it's really my jurisdiction, and I think I have to respect that.
FIFA Council meeting is tomorrow. Are you expecting Israel to be discussed at all?
No, I'm not expecting it.
Rob joins us now. Rob, I mean, the conversation there was not expecting Israel to be discussed, but frankly, you know, whether it's the music world, in the sporting world, this is an issue that is reoccurring, and frankly, the pressure is also coming from the public.
It is, and that's what a number of football associations are feeling. The Irish
Association in Dublin. They're planning a vote in November about whether or not Israel should be suspended from international football. Now, it could prove largely symbolic. How significant will it be? Well, it depends. Does UEFA go ahead with this vote? I learned yesterday that those plans that had been advanced by some within European football for a vote on Israel's suspension are on hold as the world waits to see if this peace deal will go through.
Yeah, Rob, I mean, you just said there, you know, for the Irish, it could be symbolic because they're not playing Israel. For them, it's not about that. It's about making a point, given what's been going on in Gaza.
Yes, and there are those great concerns. And going back for some time, well over a decade, the Palestinian Federation have been raising issues with FIFA about Israel. For over a year, there's been a specific FIFA investigation into the fact that there are teams playing in Israeli competitions in settlements in the West Bank, which many do consider to be Palestinian territory. That could be in breach of FIFA's rules. Also, the Palestinian Federation asked for FIFA to investigate discriminatory behaviour by Israel. But this is very much focused, obviously, on what's been happening in Gaza for the last 2 years, the number of Palestinian footballers who've been killed, the sports facilities that have been destroyed there. And what has really accelerated this feeling in Europe in recent days for a ban, before indeed these peace talks emerged, was that UN Commission of Inquiry, which did find that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, something Israel does deny. But expelling Israeli teams, stopping them going into the rest of World Cup qualifying would be one of the biggest decisions taken to isolate Israel from the cultural world.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also reached out to the State Department asking about this in terms of the World Cup. You got a response to that?
Yes, I was surprised that it was so important on their agenda, but the State Department told me that they would work to stop Israel being banned from international football, being banned from the World Cup potentially, largely being staged in the US next year. But FIFA at the moment, as we heard from Victor Montagliani, is not trying to address this issue of a ban. They very much want to leave it for Europe to decide because it is very complicated politically with relationships around the world if FIFA was to go forward with its own decision, because of course with the World Cup being largely hosted in the US, that they need the US government on board, and there is the very close relationship between the FIFA president Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump, which certainly FIFA sees as a way of ensuring the smooth progress of the World Cup. And as the State Department indicated, the Trump administration would not be happy if there was a move to ban Israel from football.
Yeah, and we saw that indication from Donald Trump a few days ago. Rob, thanks so much for that update. Looking now at how Eurovision organisers are to hold a vote next month on whether Israel can take part after several countries threatened to boycott the competition. Spain, Ireland and Slovenia are among those who don't believe Israel should be involved until the war in Gaza ends. Katie Spencer reports.
For the last 2 years, away from the music, Eurovision has attracted scenes like these. While there's over half a year to go until the next contest, already countries are poised to vote. The issue in contention being whether Israel should be allowed to enter.
You can't avoid politics. If Israel is there, we won't be there.
As the world waits to see what happens with the negotiations over Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan, within the cultural world, there's no let-up in the increasing isolation of Israel. Slovenia, alongside broadcasters from Spain, the Netherlands, Ireland and Iceland, all threatening to boycott over the country's continued military action. Unless there's a sudden breakthrough, jolted into action by the controversy, the European Broadcasting Union, which runs the contest, has said it plans to hold a vote on Israel's participation, which will take place at an extraordinary meeting of the EBU's General Assembly, to be held online early next month.
The decision on whether to allow Israel into the contest by a popular vote is really unprecedented, and I think the situation is made even more complicated by the fact that the organisers themselves have allowed certain countries to, in a sense, get away with breaking the rules or deeming them to have not broken the rules sufficiently to allow participation.
In 2023, Israel was represented by their equivalent of Britney Spears, Noah Kirel, a major star. She came third, and while the singer gets that a lot has changed politically since then, she says it's unfair to punish the Israeli people for the actions of their government.
The voters understand that politics has no connection to this competition. So hopefully that people will understand that and respect that and could see the good side of it and not the bad side.
Regardless of the outcome of next month's vote, Ireland, Iceland and Slovenia have all said their plan to boycott will stand as long as Israel's still at war.
We are all somehow prisoners of German guilt. The people who are in the country, like leading the public service media in the countries, and they don't do anything, I think they will regret.
Israel's public broadcaster Kan has said its potential disqualification could have wide-ranging implications for the competition and the values for which the EBU stands. Pop bangers and power ballads aside, the criticism of the EBU has become deafeningly loud. The world waiting and watching for political decisions and cultural ones too. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Now, France's Navy says it's boarded a Russian oil tanker suspected of being part of a so-called ghost fleet. It's happened on the eve of a European summit in Denmark, where leaders, including Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, will discuss measures to defend against alleged Russian aggression, including a drone war. Today, the Danish Prime Minister warned Moscow is waging a hybrid war on Europe.
With the war going on in Europe, we face, and I know that everybody knows that now, we face the greatest security challenge since the end of the Second World War, hybrid warfare and violations of NATO's airspace. So we have to be able to defend ourselves.
Let's bring in our Alistair Bunkle, who joins us live from Copenhagen. And Ali, there's always this concern about Russia's hybrid or asymmetrical warfare. And of course, the fact that they continue to bypass a lot of their sanctions.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is that Russia is developing and adapting its tactics, as Europe sort of fights to really keep up in many respects. The latest sort of iteration of that is these drone incursions. We saw it happen in Poland and Romania for sure. We saw something slightly different in Estonia when 2 Russian MiGs a couple of weeks ago flew around Estonian airspace for around 12 minutes, including at one point on a flight path towards the capital Tallinn. And then last week there were these incidents mainly in Denmark, but also in northern Germany as well. And the Danish authorities haven't yet publicly, officially pointed the finger at Russia. It's very complicated. I mean, the thinking is that there could be a number of links in the chain between whoever was carrying it out and the Russian state itself. And so I think that's why they've been more reluctant in some European states to say that it was Russia behind it. But this development today with this tanker that the French authorities have boarded just off the northwest coast of France is really interesting. The accusation, or what they're looking into at least, is that it's kind of part of a shadow fleet that stalks the Baltic Sea, often changing its identity, sailing under multiple different flags and under the pretense that it's a commercial vessel, but an intelligence gathering ship connected to the Russian state and perhaps, in this instance, used as the launch pad for these drones to fly here into Denmark, into Copenhagen and elsewhere, disrupting the airspace, closing the airspace, causing a real nuisance, but also undermining NATO defences. And so you've got this gathering here in Copenhagen today and tomorrow of senior European leaders, including Sir Keir Starmer, to try and work out what to do, to build what they want to do is a drone war across Europe, which would be a kind of network of defences in order to try and detect and deter Russian drones. But, it takes investment, it takes time, and it takes commitment from all of the European countries. And so we'll see whether or not there's anything concrete that comes out of the next 24 hours or so. But what I think is kind of clear to me is that, Russia is probing, it's testing, but also it's seeing where NATO weaknesses are, and every time that it sees a gap, it tries to push at that, and every time that Europe and NATO build up their defences to close that gap, Russia changes tactics and does something else.
Yeah, as you say, constantly testing the waters. Ali, thank you so much. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we'll hear from 2 prominent voices from opposite sides of an increasingly bitter divide over America's politics and faith.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States. It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news.
We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
Sky News, the full story first. Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the politics hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the politics hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. In the week since the assassination of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk, America's already deep divisions are even more stark and to some threatening. Many on the right have characterized Kirk's killing as the actions of what they call the violent radical left. During Kirk's memorial, President Trump declared how he hates his opponents. Sky's Tom Cheshire travelled through the US to hear from people on both sides on whether there's any way to find middle ground.
You had backlash for being a sort of Charlie Kirk supporter from your friends or online?
I have, but...
What do people say?
That I'm horrible, that I'm racist, that I'm homophobic, that I'm transphobic, just all of the phobics. And I don't identify myself with any of that. I think that I'm a very loving and open person.
If the other side is going to play politics on every single issue and they're going to wheel out, people to do it, I mean, you have to be ready then for the other side to play back.
I'm not going to mourn someone who was actively, rooting for my death as a trans person,
I think that when we're saying the other side, I think that the left embraces ideology that's antithetical to morality.
The presidential candidate calling the other side fascists, calling the other side Nazis, it lays the pretext for the radicals on your side to be able to do something like this.
I certainly agree that the rhetoric is definitely coming from both sides of the aisle. What I don't see right now on the right is the mainstream support for violence against popular commentators on the left.
Well, the Conservative commentator Dave Rubin is among those who toured university campuses with Charlie Kirk. Speaking a little earlier, I began by asking him for his reaction to Kirk's killing.
You know, I'd much rather talk about Charlie the man than Charlie the sort of political or cultural force. Charlie and I met back in 2017. I was on the left at the time. Charlie was on the right. We met at a speaking engagement. We quickly hit it off, even though we had wildly polarized views politically. And within 5 minutes of meeting him, he said, "Hey, Dave, you know, we disagree on some stuff, but you seem like a nice guy. Why don't we go on tour? We'll go to colleges together and we'll talk it out. We'll argue with each other. We'll argue with the kids, and then we'll break bread afterwards and do it again the next night." And that's what we did dozens and dozens of times. He was a radically decent human being who really was trying to do the thing that, you know, most of us want to believe we're doing, which is reaching out to the other side. We'd like to believe we're doing it, and it gets increasingly harder to do. Charlie really was doing it, and he was doing it at, I would say, ground zero for so much of the craziness that we all see, which is the college campus. He was a great human being. You know, the day that he was shot, I was in a Zoom meeting with a couple other people, and almost at the exact same time, you could see everybody's eyes kind of went the other way. We all sort of saw a story one way or another, because everybody's always staring at the internet while you're on Zoom. And then I happened to be actually just an hour later or so, when we found out he was actually dead, I was live on Fox News, on Fox Business Channel, and it felt absolutely surreal. And I would say that in the last 2 weeks, everything has kind of felt surreal. Almost every story that we're dealing with politically in America and culturally right now with our culture wars, it seems like Charlie was deeply invested in, and in most cases holding the good line on, really trying to bridge the divide on things. And in some way, we need him now more than ever.
You know, Dave, in your New York Post piece that you wrote, that you dedicated to Charlie, you talked about when you went on some of these tours with him to do these debates, you know, you'd often find there'd be bomb threat calls made, or the fire alarm would go off, or, you know, things hurled at you guys. I guess the question is, and you say that you need Charlie more than ever now, a horrendous, tragic incident that took place. Why was he viewed by some as such an inflammatory, divisive personality and character?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's indicative of largely what's happened to the left, particularly in America, but I think really across the Western world, which is that instead of debating ideas, they just throw a couple labels on you, and they assume that that's going to stick enough and kind of push you out of comfortable quarters. So if you say something like, oh, I want lower taxes or less government, or I don't believe in the welfare state, or I want borders, or I believe that, you know, a child's genitals match their gender. I mean, basic things. Instead of arguing the points, they'll usually call you, I mean, you know this, they'll call you a Nazi or a racist or a bigot or one of these other things. And that, for a long time, really did stifle the argument. Charlie, I think me and several other people, we really tried to walk through that and open up that conversation.
Why does America, and I know that America has always been polarized in its history, but why does it feel so fraught in this moment?
It's a tough question. It's I spend a lot of time thinking about this and talking about this on my show. I think partly what has happened here is that, you know, in a healthy society, in a healthy Western society, you want a tension between liberalism and conservatism. You want a tension between people that maybe want to be a little more socially liberal or want more government programs. And then there's and then on the other side, you have the more conservative aspect, which is usually attached more to religion and limited government. And you can kind of go back and forth with those things both ways. I think what has happened in America, but it's not just America, I think it's really all of Western Europe, is that the liberals stopped defending liberalism. The liberals went all in on progressivism and leftism. They went in on identity politics, what we now call wokeism. They sort of ushered in, they called us all racists while ushering in a racist set of ideas through diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all of these other things. Also looking at our history and from an American perspective, trying to tell us that, you know, we are fundamentally racist and we can never get over the stain of slavery and all of these things. And when the left really went crazy with that, it caused a certain portion of the right to go crazy. It was sort of a mirror image of that. So for years, when I was on the left, I'm not on the left anymore, I tried as a liberal to get the liberals to be more liberal. Unfortunately, the conclusion I've come to is that defending my liberal values has now become a conservative position, which, by the way, I think Donald Trump has done an incredible job of widening the MAGA tent, which is why you can have guys like Bobby Kennedy, who was running as a Democrat only 2 years ago, Tulsi Gabbard, who was running as a Democrat only 4 years ago, Joe Rogan, who certainly is no mainstream conservative, Elon Musk, me, et cetera, et cetera. You can have all these people within the MAGA movement.
That was Dave Rubin speaking to me a little earlier. Let's bring in Katie Halper, writer and host of the Katie Halper Show. Thank you very much, Katie, for joining us here on the programme. We're just speaking there to Dave Rubin about Charlie Kirk, his killing, and Dave Rubin expressed his admiration for Charlie Kirk, how he was basically a convert, he was a liberal, and then he moved to the right. I just want to get your reaction to what you heard there.
I mean, I think that there's a difference between celebrating someone's death. I think most people were horrified by the footage. Seeing someone killed on line is a very horrific thing to see. I don't really think, though, that that requires whitewashing or presenting a revisionist history of someone. You can mourn someone's death without celebrating their lives. And I think that it makes sense for people to feel perhaps frustrated by the way that Kirk is being lionized, given some of the hateful things that he said. And the thing about labels, yeah, labels aren't very productive, but you can actually look at what was said by Kirk and find a lot of problematic things. Yeah, ranging from LGBTQ people to Muslims. He joked about people being killed in Gaza. So again, no one is cheering on anyone's death. I certainly am not a supporter of political violence. I think it's dangerous. I think our country is extremely polarized, but we also have to be clear-eyed on who Kirk was, but also on how Trump is weaponizing his death to push through a very authoritarian agenda.
Just talk us through, because you've made a number of points there. Let's first of all break it down and talk about, I asked Dave Rubin there about why Charlie Kirk was viewed as a divisive, polarizing figure. And he basically said, look, his whole ethos was to debate, to talk to those people who didn't agree with him and would ask them to challenge him, so that, it was all about conversation. But where do you view that?
Well, that's a nice idea. I believe in debate, but the issue is, there's a difference between debate and targeting people and shutting down debate, which is what he did precisely with his things like the professor watch list, which made people's lives miserable, which basically put a target on people's backs because of their ideas. I don't think that that's a sign of debate or an exchange of ideas. That is the kind of behavior that I don't think most people see as part of a kind of vibrant democracy. It's not part of the Socratic method, and it's not part of fostering discussion. So he did believe in very repressive responses to speech that he didn't like. And again, if you look at the way that people are citing his legacy, there's a lot of contradictions, because I don't think he had a very clear, coherent, kind of principled philosophy. And again, that doesn't mean you deserve the death penalty. But it is also ironic that he called for public executions. He thought that that would be a good thing, for instance. So that is something that, again, I tend to think that someone who believes in exchange of ideas doesn't advocate for streaming the death penalty.
Katie, you sort of also talked about the fact that Donald Trump is weaponizing this moment. Just talk us through freedom of speech, the First Amendment, and where that feels like it is now in the United States. Because the other conversation, part of the conversation with Dave Rubin was about Jimmy Kimmel, his show being cancelled, then him reappearing. He said it was a business decision. It had nothing to do with pressure coming from Donald Trump. This was a business decision by his network, and the sort of it was based on that rather than pressure coming from Donald Trump or for Donald Trump asking them to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you have someone like Trump who says out loud that he wants, for instance, his Justice Department to go after certain people, when he basically calls for people to violate the separations that are supposed to check the balances of government, it's pretty obvious that what he did, I mean, we're really supposed to believe that the day after Kimmel made fun of Donald Trump, that's when he got in trouble. It was right after he made fun of Donald Trump. It was actually a funny joke. He said like the fourth stage of grief for Trump was construction because of his ridiculous response to Charlie Kirk's death, which was basically pivoting to the construction of a ballroom that he was working on. But I don't think anyone takes this seriously. And we've seen media company after media company, we've seen corporate Democrats also kind of buckle under Trump's worst authoritarian principles and impulses. And we've seen people like Stephen Miller calling the Democrats a domestic terrorist organization. We see, again, anyone like Dave Rubin who claims to take free speech seriously should be afraid of these amorphous categorizations like Antifa, which Trump is trying to legalize. Anyone who claims to be anti-censorship and pro-free speech to be up in arms over the way that Trump is literally arresting and deporting people for their views on Palestine. And this, I think, is really where you see the rank hypocrisy among people like Rubin and others on the right who champion themselves as defenders of free speech and opponents of cancel culture. And for some reason, whenever Gaza's in the mix, all of those rules go out the window because they're not really against censorship. They are perhaps against what they see as woke culture, but it's not based on a commitment to ideals. It's their own reactionary politics.
Katie, we have less than a minute to go on program, so I'm going to have to leave it there. But thank you so
just
much.
One thing I would say, this is also a reminder of why the independent media is so important, because corporate media does so much polarization also, and corporate media and feckless Dems really do buckle under Trump. So
I would say American corporate media.
Yeah, sure. We're probably the worst.
Yeah.
But I think it goes around. Yeah. And just look at the coverage of Gaza and you'll see that.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I'm just going to leave you with images that we showed you earlier of the flotilla, which we're now being told by the Israeli Foreign Ministry that they have been intercepted and some members have now been removed from the flotilla. That's it from me and the team. The news at 10 next.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the politics hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No,
but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the politics hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?